when he talked about putting the winger wide, and now the D, all they look for is the winger wide. Like, I think coaching girls hockey, I think we all can, figure or have an example of something works, then they just default to that all the time, right? And because they want to be, and so in regards to shift length, it's been like, I find biggest challenge for me is for when they need to realize that they have an odd man break, or they need to back check for an odd man chance again, on regardless of shift length, right? And so I find that putting an objective, not putting a solid number on that, they totally like let themselves off the hook in regards to what the situation is and what's going on.
Yeah.
So there's been times when we said, okay, we want to get, good shift length, everybody can get involved. That happened, and I'm going back a couple of years, but when I was coaching the San Jose team, we had 4 lines. And so, it was, you can imagine we're not 20-minute periods, we're 15-minute periods. And so some kids didn't even get on the ice because some were staying on for a minute and a half. So, we implemented the 30, 45-second rule. Well, we would have odd man rushes, clear cut, odd man rushes, and we would dump the puck in, right?
Yeah.
And they came off and they were saying, well, I thought you wanted me to change at 45 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and again, I mean, I know you both have experienced this, and to the nth degree, it's how much is it to be able to say, okay, well, there needs to be a bit of a read and react, and I'm not going to let you off the hook by saying, oh, this was 40 seconds or 30 seconds and I changed, and that's the reason why I made a bad decision to not back check or to not go on the offense.
Well, we had that happen, Dom. These ones were taking long shifts.
Yeah.
And the other team had the puck and they're doing a breakout. All 3 forwards came off. So it was a 5-on-2.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to, they missed a shift because of taking long shifts.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing in their brain. And you can't all come off.
No, I know, but and again, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but as I say, but that's the challenge. And then I will get it constantly. Well, what's our setup on our power play? Is it a 1-3-1? Is it a boxing one? Is it an overload? And I hesitate, because I know as soon as I say it's a 1-3-1, they're going to go to a 1-3-1 position and have zero regard for what's going on the puck. Zero.
Yeah.
And I actually that was learning on the pro side, because I had to boil it down. Now, the pretty good players that play at the American League, and so, but they were, so, they wanted, and again, we had lots of guys that could play on the power play, so they wanted to do exactly what we were talking about. So again, in my, being a new coach, we had structure on the breakout, routes on the entries. We had sets that we wanted to run within the zone. And I gotta be honest, we were freaking awful. We were terrible. And I couldn't get mad at them, because they would come off and they'd be like, well, I thought we were running this, right? Because again, not being an experienced coach, I figured, like, if I have it mapped out to the nth degree, then there's no excuse. Well, part of it was recognizing, okay, what are we trying to do in the breakout? Okay, we're beating the first player. What are we trying to do on the entry? We want to have speed with 3 at the line. What do we want to do when we get a lost possession? We want 3 on the puck. What do we want to do when we get it? We want it to switch puck side and get it to the net. And it sounds so simple, but then they started to make plays because there was concepts that they could understand, and concepts that they didn't have to think, okay, where should I be? It was more, I mean, and I guess that's coaching too, right? But yeah, I think trying to articulate that in such a way for the girls to understand that it's not about, yes, it's about shift length, but it's more about being able to read the situation of what's going on, and is, to me, the harder challenge.
Right? Yeah. Well, I think I watched the Flames last night, and they couldn't get over the blue line on their power play.
Yeah.
And I listened to who's the guy that runs it in Edmonton there?
Gulletson.
Yeah, he talked, and he said the big change for him last year was to tell him he wanted them to score on the rush.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just to get in the zone and set up.
Yeah.
And he says his mistake was, like you're saying, he taught it like chess. You're here, you're here, you're here. And as soon as they started trying to score in the rush and then winning the loose puck,
Yeah.
Well, because then things started to work.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I had very similar experience, right? Like that was a aha moment as well, running the power play, because as I say, like it was, I had very good coaches, very, very organized coaches on top of me. And they wanted, things a certain way and mapped out. And the reality is that the game isn't that way. As much as we try to make it that, it isn't. And there has to be, I believe there has to be a structure and a concept in place, but there has to be the flexibility to understand what you're trying to accomplish. And again, like that's, it's a fine line, because there's details within all of that, right? It's the art of trying to get them to understand the concept and then work within the details, the individual details within that, so they can execute. But it's not easy, because everybody wants to please, right? They want to please your coach. And so if you're telling them that you want them in a certain position on a breakout, they'll be in that position. But it's, I guess, understanding that there has to be a read on it as well. And it never does end, but they want it to, especially with the girls. They want it to be black and white. Like, absolutely want it to be black and white.
Oh yeah, you get them, and in the defensive zone, they'll be standing there waiting for a pass.
Yeah,
they forget to play defense first.
Yeah.
They want to be in the right spot for the pass, and they're standing there. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I've got a. Go ahead. Well, I've got just. I'll let you go. I have a pretty interesting little story what happened to us, but I know you were going to say something, Wally. Go ahead. You're muted, Wally.
No, I'm good. I've got nothing. I've got something on my mind, but you guys keep going.
Okay. So we have we have a arrangement with a tier with a club team, and so we borrow players from them, and we've lent them some players from our team. And it was interesting because every coach's style is a little bit different, and I had their coach join me on the bench for the Fire Starter when they came down, and they played with us, and he has some really good players. He probably has the three players we have. They're probably D1 players. They've actually, the one has gotten an offer from a D1 school. The other two, the one will get an offer, but she's looking for an Ivy, so she's kind of holding out. She's gotten multiple offers from non-Ivy schools, and then there's a younger one who she's really good. She's probably one of the best in her birth year in California. So we've kind of had this exchange program, if you will, and he came on the bench with me, and so there was an event that I wasn't able to go to, and he was able to, he was able to take the team, and he was able to coach it. And so Obviously the dynamic's a little bit different because he knows the girls, but doesn't like know them, personally and whatever else have you. And so, I am really, really hesitant to do video with the girls because I've tried to do individual video with them based on what they're doing, and I find every single time it becomes defensive, and it becomes not what I'm looking for them to see at all. So I've had to get a little bit creative. So he's running they're doing an event in out east, and so he has a different, not a bad coaching style, but just a different coaching style in regards to constructive criticism as they come off, as to what they were, doing right and wrong. And so after one of the games, one of the girls says, can we do some video? And so he was like, sure. And he does it quite often with his own group that he has. And so he went and grabbed a room and started to do video with the group. Well, and I had one of my assistants in there as well, and she kind of gave me the play-by-play, and so did he. And they prefaced it all by saying, this isn't personal, this is just to, as an example to show what we're looking for, this, that, and the rest. So all of a sudden, he had girls storming out of the room. He had girls confronting, being, indignant on the fact, arguing as to what they were trying to do and what not to do. And again, like I could tell he was afterwards, he's like, hey, did you get any feedback? Because I know it was very inflammatory as to what happened. And then again, like, as I say, it's just, and again, he's articulate, and I'm sure that he was, wasn't accusatory with anything that he was showing, but so, some of the quote unquote mistakes that he was showing, the girls can handle it. The girls, and from his team, from our team, and again, I think part of it, his team, one of the girls from his team, I think, stormed out, and I think part of it is, she's new to our group, and she's probably a little bit embarrassed and whatever else have you, but I kind of, and then you try to pick up the pieces, and you try to figure out a way, because I do believe that there is a way to be able to go about showing things. So I grabbed them, and I said, okay, we're going to do some video. And I grabbed them, and I will be honest, it's really the first time that I've showed them group video. I've showed them individual videos before, but the first time I showed them group video. So what I did is I grabbed 5 goals that we scored, and I split them all in groups. And then I said, okay, I want you to tell me what the other team could have done to prevent us from scoring, right? And it so they went around, and again, I mean, it wasn't perfect by any means, but I think it got them thinking a little bit in regards to, and what I tried to do is, obviously we were making the same mistakes their team was making, but I tried to show the other team making mistakes and what we were doing. Because one of the things that we really struggle with is that if there's a puck battle in the corner and the defenseman and the forward are engaged within the puck battle, the net front D won't recognize where the third player is, and they'll stand at the front of our net, and they won't adjust at all. And so, that was one of the points. And so, yeah, the next game we had, it improved a little bit, but yeah, I just think it's just, and again, like, part of it is the maturity of the girls for sure, because I let them know, I'm like, listen, I would venture to say that if you're going to continue on playing at a high level, you're going to have to deal and understand the constructive criticism within, right? So, I don't know. I don't know what the best solution is. Is it to try to make them exposed to that, so they're desensitized to it, or continue to try to
Well, Don,
control? I don't know.
I've been through that years ago, and I much everything you've talked about, I've been through and dealt with, and now that I'm not coaching, I don't get a chance to try to do it, but I'm trying to convince coaches. The use of video, I was like all of us. Initially, it was our show, and we were describing everything, pointing out everything, and after about 5 minutes, they would shut you off.
Yeah.
But when you point out mistakes, this is the first thing I learned. I was too much video, too much pointing out of what they were doing wrong. It was having little effect. So I actually began to, and I dreamt of this, that if I sent a clip out of a good play where we scored a goal, and I would ask them to, if I was to do it again, I would ask them to describe everything we did well from one zone to the other zone to score that goal. And then they would write their response or talk their response. But I always thought emailing a positive clip of what they did well, and if they left anything out, you could add to it. The next question was exactly what you said. Now, we did it well. What did the other team not do well? What could they have done better? And that's the only way to go with video, because they get pumped up about what they did well, and they learn from the other team's mistakes, which you always make.
Yep.
And one clip, I've never even had a chance to experiment with it. But you might try that as an assignment with your team. Send out the clip and have them write down everything they did well on their own time away, and maybe have a classroom session and look at it again and get pumped up about that clip. But then as a group, do what you did. Look at the other team's mistakes and what did they learn from it. Because in the end, when you talk about them defaulting, they're thinking about what you told them to do. They're not thinking on their own.
Yeah.
And all you want them to do is to begin to make decisions based on what they see, not on what you told them to do. So basically, it gets into the Socrates method of teaching and coaching. No longer prescribing structure and deliberately doing things that you're told, but figuring things out based on questioning. And it engages them, and there's no negativity. So the conflict you had with your guest coach with you, using video that way, to me, it isn't productive. It is for us. Actually, I find I'm guilty of this. I've been guilty of it over the years, for talking too much, telling what I know to the players.
Yeah.
And coaching isn't about telling what you know. Coaching is about discovering what they know and then guiding them to what they don't know, and not learning by you, from you directly, but just learning by thinking through the process. So you mentioned a few years ago with the American League team on power play. And I wonder if you could talk about that story where at the end of the year, you did the exercise of putting them in units and then coming back. Do you recall that story?
Yeah, no, I do. It wasn't a power play. It was a 5-on-5. But yeah, no, we had taken, or the head coach had taken the clips and had divided the team up into 3 or 4 groups, and everybody had a separate a separate computer, and the only job the coach had was just to facilitate the video and to be able to run it forward and back, and then just had the players amongst themselves discuss as to what they saw and what what we were trying to demonstrate, and the good and the bad within the clip. And it was, I mean, that's obviously shaped, my idea of video, of showing, because the feedback that we received in the exit meetings was that was the most memorable video session that we had over the year, and that there was the most benefit within it, and that players, or at least this player in particular, was the only thing that they were hoping for when watching video in a group, was that they wouldn't be on it, right, to making a mistake type of thing. So yeah.
Well, that's the gist of it. We years ago, it was yelling and telling them what to do and getting angry with what they didn't do in the old school day. And we're trying to get coaches. The problem isn't players, it's us.
Yeah.
To go from yelling and then telling, which is all we do at minor hockey, to asking. And really, the art of communication and coaching is going to be coaches to get out of the habit of telling and experimenting with asking and listening. Because until you do that, you have no idea what they think, what they understand, and what you might need to guide them with. So in the same regard, the routine between periods that I prescribe now when I'm having coaches complete their high performance evaluation, I have them follow this when I come to their ice sessions between periods. It's a routine. And on the bench, after the period, the players go in, the coaches talk about what happened. I ask them, what do you usually do? And they usually talk about what happened, what they have to do better. And they usually go in the room and tell them. But I said, this time, 2 questions. You ask each other, what did we do well? So you get into a positive frame of mind, regardless of how the period went. And then what do we need to do better? And the head coach listens to everybody, filters all the information, and you go into the room and ask the players the same 2 questions, listen to their answers, and then say what needs to be said as a head coach. That to me is common sense to education today and coaching communication today. And I'll tell you what, coaches are getting there. They're starting to ask more questions. So I'm just trying to encourage each coach, if you have 4 on a team, make sure you ask the player 1 question. Each player gets asked a question, but you ask 1 to a player and listen to the response. It might be the drill. It might be something that happened in the game as soon as it happened, and listen and see if they understand what happened, what they might have done differently, that kind of thing. So it's I'm glad you got to talk about that, because it's something I wanted to edit and get out there for coaches, is start asking questions. We have this knowledge. We tell them all the things we want, and it gets down to, I like your word, default. You tell them what to do, and they'll remember what you told them, and they'll default to what you told them, and not flexibly make decisions within the structure you want them to. And in power play, as you talked about before, Daniel Goyette asked me to run a practice for her because she was away for an induction in Quebec. She wanted me to run a special teams practice because her team was struggling. And I did what I would have written in the national women's curriculum. I worked on the tactical power play skills in small groups. I did a small drill, 3 versus 1 umbrella, live drill to utilize those tactical skills. And then we went into the zone and did 5 against 4. But I held my hand up, and if I had a open hand, the defensive players were passive. That was the way they played, and the power play had to do what was best when they were passive. Or I held it up and opened my hand and clenched my fist, continually, which meant semi-active. And then when I clenched my fist, it had to be full press. So they learned to react to passivity and get the puck up high and get it through seams to the net. Semi-active, that's what your power play is. You might do the give and go or the L, the short long pass or whatever, semi-active. But when they do a full press, that's when you need real quick puck movement, short passes, long passes, and maybe spread out and get them caught by being aggressive. So I just wanted to share that. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, absolutely, Wally. I know, like my last year there in with the Flames farm team there, it was during COVID. We would go into the room and because everybody was separated, right? You weren't able to put everybody in one dressing room, so we would split coaches and we would go into one room and we would ask what we needed to do better, and we would come back, report back to to the head. But I don't know that we kind of wasn't the one piece you talked about in regards to starting with what we did positive, to get in the right frame of mind. I like that. I think that's super beneficial. And then ultimately having the coach kind of summarize and at the end, because I think that's an important piece too, that I don't know that we actually did that. I think that was more due to the fact of COVID and not being able to get everybody into the same room at once. But I do think that ultimately the coach does need to make a quote unquote decision as to what we're going to do as a team moving forward. But obviously everybody having had their input on everything is super beneficial. I mean, that's the buy-in, right? It goes back into the buy-in. I think that everybody craves.
So the buy-in, I use the word engaged. You've actually asked them.
Yeah.
They're thinking. They're processing what the question was and making the answer, coming up with the answer based on what they've seen and think. Now, you don't know that in a game. What are they thinking? Why are they doing that? Once you tap into that reservoir of their thinking process and how fast it is, I think coaches would be amazed at how much they, or if they're not thinking, how much they're going to begin to learn to think because you've asked them questions and are getting them to think.
Mm-hmm.
But in the past, we've only told them what to do. We've developed robots and players of habit. And I know years ago, talking about that default, you remember when I think Vancouver was one of the first teams to start man-on-man D-zone cover. And the story was a player, they got scored on, a player came off the ice, and the coach went to talk to him and, tell him he didn't do his job. He says, but I had my man. He didn't switch. They were just playing man on man and got scored on. So, to that effect, my thinking is D-zone cover is man on man when it should be, and man zone when it should be. And it's the same as a power play. It should be an umbrella when it should be. It should be a spread when they are doing a full press. And I think players can figure that out. I don't know that we've figured out how to allow them to figure it out in a simple way. There's a structure to it, but not enough that paralyzes them into what they've been told. And I think that's the difference between players today that are great. There's more of them today that are intuitive, solving problems of their own on the ice, thinking together. And actually, when I watch the NHL game today, I think the best teams, players do that the best. They think on their feet, they have excellent skill sets, and they're executing the tactical strategies, whether it's special teams, forecheck, breakout, you name it. There is a prescription about how to break out. And back in the day, I remember a story about Lidstrom being asked, well, what's the breakout? What's your breakout? And he just said, it's the situation you're in. Whatever the situation is, you have to figure out what to do. So right now I'm working with a U13 team whose coach with college playing experience has focused on wheeling, carrying the puck behind the net, telegraphing the breakout pass to the winger on the other side where they've overloaded and they can't get the puck out. He hasn't gone into evasive tight turns and gaining time and space to hit the winger, continuing to skate to hit the center. He hasn't worked on D to D. His methodology is wheel. Just keep going behind the net, build up speed, and it's not working. So my role now is trying to mentor and get him to work on the different nuances of breakout, appreciating whatever the game situation is, you'll figure out what to do. You might reverse it in the